Hey listeners, welcome back to Off Over 50 and Fired. Now what? With Linda
and Shelley.
So last time we talked about where we were now versus then in our journey. We also featured two of our listeners, and we got caught up on where they are today versus when they first heard about being restructured.
Mm-hmm. But Linda, before we begin, let's talk about our wine recommendation of the evening.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, it's a lovely Thule, a Pinot Noir from Sonoma County.
Excellent, a California wine.
Nice and light for this warm day. Cheers.
Cheers.
So where we are today has a lot to do with the network that we formed, both to deal with the ordeal of being restructured and the journey of finding new opportunities along the way.
So we're excited to have another one-off segment with our guest, Prem.
You mean Prem.
That's right, Prem. For the last 5 years, I've been saying Prem, and actually it's Prem.
It's just been really polite. Don't be polite. Just tell people you're saying my freaking name wrong.
That's right. It's not good to find that out over 5 years later. So Prem, we're very excited to have. He was a colleague of ours in our previous life. And we actually worked on some very challenging cross-functional projects with him.
We recently had reached out to him to have a connect. We went to lunch. We had a nice, enjoyable afternoon. We discussed a lot of good things. And one of those components was all around networking. And, we asked what he's been doing in this space. So we wanted to ask Prem to come up and discuss it a little bit.
So let's welcome Prem.
Shelley, Linda, thanks so much for, kind of having me on here and being able to talk a little bit about this.
So, Prem, tell us, what do you value really in networking?
What I value in networking and why it's been so helpful for me is it's actually been one of the core ways I've gotten things done, in the office. So the ability to talk to people and get to know people across multiple parts of the organization that I used to work at helped me really connect the dots about how the organization worked. And when issues came up that normally I wouldn't know who to go talk to, I actually went and used these extended networks I built within the organization. So I'd see someone at a training or see someone in the cafeteria that knew someone else. I started to get to know them and understand what they did and how they did it, and what they're kind of, for lack of a better word, what their use, what they were doing in the organization. So there was actually a huge project I worked on last year in the e-commerce space. And what I did, it was a unique project that involved packaging. And we had this huge problem we had to solve. And what I was able to do was use the people within my network across very varied parts of the organization and bring them together to do a huge workshop that I normally never would have talked to. And what ultimately that project did was help me create this workshop and build an ongoing project team that helped the organization I worked for save a lot of money. But never would have happened if I didn't go across and build these networks across broad parts of the organization.
So you did a lot of fostering and nurturing of relationships to really help you get the job done, right?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I did. It was I'd meet someone in a meeting that was unrelated to this, and I'd go and ask them hey, I'd love to get to know you better. Let's talk a little bit and help me understand what you do. And in that process, you started building these different understandings of, oh, well, that person could be helpful in something I'm working on today. Or it might have been 6 months later, I would have remembered, hey, I remember meeting that person. Maybe they can help me with this.
So Prem, it seems that the skill sets that you built over time in your previous role really have helped you now that you're sort of looking for new opportunities outside of the company. So can you tell us a little bit about how you kind of took the skill sets from your previous role and now are utilizing them as you're looking for new opportunities?
Yeah, no, it's Linda, it's a great question. I think one of the things I'm doing right now is trying to I think about it outside. It's easy to do within an organization's ecosystem, right? It's easy to go and say, hey, I'm going to go talk to these people because we have a common goal. We're working for the same company. But it can be a little scary when you're outside and thinking about it. But some of the things I've done is talk to the people that know me the best. So I'm talking to the people that I've worked with that are still working there, or that aren't even worked with that may not be working there, and then other friends I have that are working within this space that I've known for years and years. So I've tried to take this big, scary word of, oh my gosh, I'm going to put myself out there and network, and really bring it closer to me and say, who are the people that know me the best? And that's where I started, right? I think of networking as concentric circles, like the innermost circles, the people that I know.
Like your comfort zone.
My comfort zone. And, you know, there's friends that I know, right? I have friends that are teachers and lawyers and not necessarily in this space. So the innermost circles, people that I feel very comfortable with that are in a related space.
So your core.
My real core. That's who I've really talked to. And what I like to do is I like to say I've been seeding that. You know, when this happened a few months ago, I started talking to those people and letting them know, here's what's going on with me. And what's been really neat is the opportunities that are now coming before me are from those things I seeded several months ago. So networking isn't also about this immediate, you know, this instant gratification. Like I'm going to go and this person's going to, you know, help me get something right away. That's not the purpose of it. It's really about letting people know that, you know, you want to connect with them. Here's what you're doing, and the people that genuinely kind of care and want to be helpful are the ones that are going to be most vested in helping you get out there and try to help get your name out or keep their ears open for you. And so I think that's kind of how that's how I've been approaching, you know, this.
So that's great. Like the whole idea of starting in your comfort zone, starting in the core group of people who you know who are in a related area, but also the ways that you can network can also be very overwhelming, especially today. You've got LinkedIn, you've got different communities you can be on, online, offline, professional organizations, and other venues. What did you found, you know, to get yourself sort of on that path or on that journey to having successful networking? How do you start with so many ways that you can network?
Yeah, no, I think it's a hard thing, right? It's very overwhelming. I mean, if I, you know, let's use LinkedIn as an example. You know, I think I have like 1,800 connections on LinkedIn. So that's very overwhelming, right? If I go and think about, oh my gosh, I know the bulk of them, but some of them are friends of friends. But again, I think what it is start with the core who then introduced me to other people, right? So I remember reaching out to a particular friend of mine and describing, hey, here are the types of things I want to do. And I'd love to see if you know people in this space. And he not only referred me to actually a role in his organization that I explored a little bit, but he referred me to 3 other people and said, here, and sent email introductions to these people. So I then used, email to start going and have coffee. I went and said, hey, here's what I'm thinking. I'd love to pick your brain on, what do you think the scope is for someone with my background in the space, and get to learn about you. Because ultimately networking is also that two-way, right? It's, I'm not just going to go ask them for help, but I'm going to say, here are the things I can bring to the table. So we went and had coffee, and what did that person do? Actually help me set up a conversation with another person. Said, hey, I think you should talk to this person because they've got a similar background and they can help you, So I took the approach of talking to those people, building the circles, so to say, and then I connected with that person on LinkedIn as well. So I use LinkedIn as an enabler to build my circles, so to say. Start with the core and then use that tool to keep building beyond that.
Yeah, so you're expanding. And I love what you said, about it's really not what you know, but who you know, right? So this, you met somebody and then all of a sudden they're, turning you on to 3 other people that could really potentially help you.
Yeah, it's hard, right? It's hard when you're going out there and you're saying, hey, I'm going to, the way I'm going to go find, after you reflect and think about what you want to do, it's easy to go and say, I'm going to go post for every job I see on LinkedIn, or I'm going to go to, X company's website and post. You know what? Go do that. Learn about what's out there in the industry. But that's really not the most valuable way to figure out what your next role may be or figure out where you want to get to. It may work, but more likely than not, when someone knows you and trusts you and is able to go and champion your story to someone, That's how you're going to get, that's how I believe I'm going to get my story best represented out there.
Yeah, and it's funny because, that's kind of, I think, what Linda and I initially did. We were just putting like our resume out there, right? Yeah. We were seeing all these jobs and we're like, oh, that's really cool. I think I'm going to apply. And then before you know it, you got yourself so freaking overwhelmed because you're like, I can't even remember who I sent one to or anything, So it's great that you're taking it in part X.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that you've kind of turn things around, because a lot of people that we talk to, especially in the outsourcing group, is they first start with the postings and they may not know anyone, and then they try to find sort of a link into the company. But I think your way is a bit smarter. It's like, first talk to people, find out what's out there, what are some potential opportunities, and sort of seed that and kind of move that along.
I mean, it's spot on. I mean, there's been a couple opportunities I've seen out there, and they're like, oh, the posting's going to close in a day or something, and I'll let it close. I look at the description, and I'm like, who do I know there? And I've built connections, or I know people who know people there, and help me do that. Even if the posting's been closed, that person's been able to get my resume in, because the posting is a way to help some certainty for the HR folks or whatever, but me getting in through the other person has been far more successful than waiting, uploading a posting. It doesn't, I've gotten more interviews that way. I've gotten more dialogue, and I've gotten, much more, a much better understanding if those roles are actually a fit even as well. So I can't emphasize how important, these contacts and relationships and partnerships I've built are instrumental in making that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like one of the points they make. Not only is it a good fit for you, but sometimes organizations post roles and they're not really ready to go ahead with those roles.
Absolutely. I'm going to give you an example. My name is out there on LinkedIn, which is, I think, anyone who's not really spending time building that as their way to brand and taking a class or taking, really diving in is missing out. That is the way your name is out there and your brand is represented. So I would highly recommend that. But, I've been, there've been recruiters that have reached out to me through that and, looked at my profile and said, wow, you're a great fit for such and such job. But when they go and I've gotten feedback back as to, hey, they're not really not interested in talking to you because of X, Y, Z, I listen to them and I'm like, you're not representing me the way the story is built. You're representing them from what you can kind of gather. I'm like, you don't know me. You don't know me. And I think that's why the building networks, in person, hopefully, if not on the phone, through trusted partners is really the way to go. And again, if you're looking at this at a zero-sum, short-term game, it's never going to be helpful. I can't tell you the number of jobs, the number of promotions, the number of things that I've done. I've always had to have the performance, right? The performance is critical to making that happen. But if you're not building the networks, it's going to be very difficult to keep kind of, moving.
I just really like the idea too, though, about what you just said around, you don't know me. This headhunter or whomever it was, didn't think you were a fit for that job. Because, you put your resume out there, but your resume only can do just, a certain part of the legwork, right? It's then up to you, like you've been describing, about creating those networks so people really get to know the whole Prem. It's not just half of what's seen in the resume.
No, it's exactly right. I mean, it's hard work, right? It's not like we're sitting here and it just happens. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of preparation. I'm read up on the person and, if I'm going to call them or whatever, and try to find the small points of where we're actually aligned on something. So I'll read and say, hey, that person's looks like they're from Chicago. Well, I'm from Chicago, or they went to school in, Wisconsin. Well, and I try to find those points of contact to help break the ice. And, it actually, you get to peel the onion faster in building trust if it's someone that's a friend of a friend. So I always say, don't let go of the small stuff. The small things matter in helping, start the relationship building. But then again, it's about being, it's not like having a list of questions and going through that. It's starting it off and then having a conversation. You're just kind of meeting someone.
And letting the conversation go where